Good morning. Sorry for the delay. Let's get started. Okay, in the Farbrengen that we're learning, as in most Farbrengens, the Rebbe covers many different subjects, and he jumps back and forth between subjects. And to make it easier for us to follow it, I think it would be easier for us if we stay with one subject at a time. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order of the way that Rebbe said it to hopefully, so I can understand it better. There is a pasuk in this week's parsha about tefillin, and says in the Talmud that the entire Torah is connected to tefillin. So although every mitzvah has a connection to all other mitzvahs, and that's why the Gemara says that if you are involved with one mitzvah, you're exempt from doing a different mitzvah. Because the mitzvah you're doing has in it a component of the other mitzvah as well. Not just you're doing one mitzvah. Every mitzvah has in it an element of all other mitzvahs. And so while you're doing one mitzvah, you're also involved in the other mitzvah too. And therefore you don't have to stop this mitzvah to do that mitzvah because this mitzvah has in it the components of that other mitzvah as well. So by all the mitzvahs except for tefillin, it's not as obvious its connection to all the mitzvahs. By tefillin, we find a unique connection that the Gemara says that it has a relevant relationship to all the mitzvahs. So what is unique about tefillin? How do we see more of the mitzvah element in tefillin than other mitzvahs? How do you make tefillin? Take an animal hide and you make this animal hide a object of holiness, and that's really what every mitzvah is. Every mitzvah is taking a physical object, making something spiritual out of it. So that's what happens in every mitzvah. You're taking something physical and you're creating something spiritual out of that physical item. So by tefillin, it's obvious. It's how you see that. Before this was an animal hide, and now it's a holy object. So you don't see, but by tzedakah, for example, the money that you give to tzedakah doesn't become holy money. You're allowed to exchange that money, right? You put the money in the pushka, you can use that money for change. Doesn't become holy. But the truth is that you are creating holiness in Shemayim, in heaven, through giving tzedakah, and you are elevating the godly energy, not just in the tzedakah that you give, but in every dollar that you earn. It says in Tanya that by setting aside a portion to charity, then elevates all of the money that you have. That just like in the Beis Hamikdash, where they would offer up one animal, that animal elevated all the animals in the world. That elevated the entire world. Similar way, when you apportion some of your money to tzedakah, that has an impact on the money that you're not giving to tzedakah. So by every mitzvah, there is a physical item, and there's a spiritual impact. By tefillin, you see how this physical item is now a holy item. Before it was just a cow, now it's a holy item. So that's why the word tefillin comes from the word teufel, which means connection. An esrog is also something which wasn't holy before, and you now made this an object of a mitzvah. But by tefillin, it's the Rebbe writes, that is the specific, every mitzvah, in addition to being the will of Hashem, it has its unique component. Every mitzvah has a skula, has a spiritual remedy. So there are other mitzvahs where the physical object becomes a spiritual thing, but by tefillin, that's its theme. The theme of tefillin is about converting the physical to the spiritual. In other places, the Rebbe says, for example, that there are other schools of thought that out of Judaism, Havdil, there is a discussion about what is the most important thing to focus on ideology, your behavior, or your character. And in Yiddishkeit, uniquely, there's a holistic approach. Hashem wants the entire person. Hashem wants our entire being to be connected to Him. And it's a tefillin. You see openly how it's about the entire person. You see how Yiddishkeit says, put on the tefillin, and thereby by putting on the tefillin, that's going to bring your entire persona, make it part of. It's going to elevate it and make your mind think differently, your heart feel differently. There were certain instances where famous rabbis made some remarkably foolish statements, and the Rebbe said that apparently this person's tefillin isn't kosher. Because how could it be a person who has kosher tefillin could say such a thing? So some things that by wearing tefillin, it puts your mind to feel a certain way and your heart to feel a certain way. And so it does something to us as people in a down-to-earth way. That's one of the reasons why the tefillin straps are supposed to extend so low, because the tefillin is about elevating every part of our persona, even the lower elements of our persona. So while other mitzvahs have this component of transforming the physical to the spiritual, that's what tefillin is about. Tefillin is about transforming. In other words, by mitzvah of esrog, for example, esrog is not about transforming the physical to the spiritual. That's what's the word in English? Ancillary component. Is that right usage of that word? I'll hear from Yonatan later if it wasn't. So it's auxiliary. Ancillary. Thank you. Whatever. It's something which is not the main thing. It's something which also happens. It also happens when you're doing the mitzvah of esrog. You're also elevating the physical esrog and making it whole. By tefillin, that's what it's about. The mitzvah of esrog is about unity, according to one explanation. Mitzvah of esrog is about proclaiming Hashem's truth in all directions, in every place. Mitzvah of esrog has another component there. Its transformation element is just an auxiliary and is a side component. By tefillin, its theme is the transformation of the physical to the spiritual. That's what it's about. So that's why the Gemara says about tefillin specifically that it's connected to all mitzvahs, because it's something which is central to every mitzvah. Every mitzvah does this. Every mitzvah elevates the physical and transforms it to spiritual. So in this Farbrengen, they've explained many concepts about tefillin. Let's do one of them. How do we know we're supposed to wear 4 sections of the Torah in our head tefillin? It says in the Talmud, you should tie it as a sign on your hand, and it should be a sign between your eyes. So the word the Talmud uses for sign is totafos. The word the Torah uses is totafos. And Rashi says, why does totafos mean 4 sections of why is it 4 compartments? How do we get from the word totafos? There's a sign. How do you get to 4 parchments in the word totafos? So Rashi says that Rashi brings from the Talmud from Rabbi Akiva that tat bekaspi shtayim pas ba'afriki shtayim. In African, pas means 2, and in Caspian, tat means 2. So 2 and 2 is 4. Tat and toita fos, both toita and fos together, you have altogether 4, and that hints to the fact that it's supposed to have 4 parts of the Torah in our head tefillin. But the question is, you have 2 words that can mean 2. You don't have, who says it's supposed to add the 2 and the 2 together? You have 2 words from foreign languages that both translate as 2. Where do you get 4 from? It says 2 twice. You should have the thing that you should have 2 and 2. It doesn't say you should have 2 plus 2. It says this is a thing of 2. There's 2 parts of this word taitafes, and both parts of the word mean 2, not 4. So actually, Tosfos disagrees with Rashi, and he has a whole different way of understanding the message of 4 from the word taitafes. Tosfos has a whole different thing. Tosfos says the word taitafes is used in the Torah several times. Sometimes the word taitafes is written with a vav, sometimes written without a vav. So the Talmud says, how come Toita face is sometimes written with a vav, sometimes without a vav? So the Talmud says like this, that hold on a second. Yonathan's thinking, I don't wake up in the morning to do Tesis. And certainly I have to Toita face. But the internet's the price you pay. Okay. Okay. It says in Gemara Sanhedrin, it says in the Torah that the word Latoita face 3 times. In one of them, it has Latoita face without a letter Vav, and the other 2 it has letter Vav. So the letter Vav is plural. So Tesa says it would seem that if you take the 3 times the Torah uses the word Loteta face, and you should have hold on a second. Yeah. Tesa says if according to Rabbi Akiva, each time it says Loteta face means 4, and you have 3 times the rule Loteta face, so you should have 3 times 4. You should need to have 12 sections in our film, because each rule Loteta face means 4, and you have in the Torah it says 3 times Loteta face, so you need to have 12 sections of film. So Tesa says, why don't you need to have 4 times 4? It says 4 times. We said that one of the Loteta face is written. It's written with a vav, which means it's 2, and the other 2 are written without a vav, so they equal 1. Let me start over again. Latoita face by itself, according to Rabbi Akiva, means 4. So if you have the letter vav, so then that means you're saying there's more than 1 Taita face. That means you have 4 times. It means you have 4 times 2. So according to Rabbi Akiva, it would seem you should have 16 parts of tefillin because it's 4 times 4. But Rabbi Tesa says, according to Rabbi Akiva, one of the Taita face is not extra. It's not something you could derive things from, because the Torah needs to use that word just to tell us the fact that you have to put on tefillin. So it's not meant to extract from it the meaning of what the tefillin are about. And therefore, you only have 3 remaining words of Taita face. So with 3 remaining words of Taita face, you should have 12 sections in tefillin. So Tesis answers, the word Taita face is translated as 4. Hold on a second. Tesa says the reason why you don't need to have 3 times 4, according to Rabbi Akiva, is because Taita face means 4 in every language. Taita face darish dala batim l'cholash. Taita face is not means, but Taita face is interpreted as 4 for all languages. Shnei tat shnei pas, which means, in other words, that it's not that we're using both parts of the word to equal up to 4, like Rashi says. Rather, according to Tosfos, the word toitafos itself means 4. So how come we don't have 12 altogether? It's because we're using the same word. Okay, I give up. I'll have to look at this later. But let me tell you what we're going with Rashi. Chadal chad teitafis agufei, meshanish teitafis darish dal batam mechalashim. Shnei tat shnei pas. Teitafis darish shnei pas dal batam mechalashim. Okay, I have to look at the tastes. No taste is the same. But what Rashi, what we were asking was about Rashi. Our question was on Rashi. Rashi, how come Rashi says that there's two parts of the word, and who says the two parts of the word mean you should add them together? So the Tzemach Tzedek explains that although we're saying that the word Taitafais is part Caspian, part African, it's not that Tzemach Tzedek says, not Chas V'Shalom, that the Torah has some words in it which aren't holy, and we took words from other languages. The Torah is the first language, so how could the Torah have words of Caspian and African? So the Tzemach Tzedek explains that the word Tat and Pas, which both mean two, originally were part of the holy language of Hebrew. And then when Hashem mixed the languages together with other languages, in Caspian and African, they had some of the holy language in their language, and therefore they have some Hebrew words in their language. It's not that we learn what the Hebrew words mean from other languages, and Torah has words from other languages in it. Rather, the Torah is a holy language. And the Torah's language was mixed together with other languages when God mixed together all languages. How does that help us? Because then it comes out that the word Toitafos is actually a Hebrew word. It's a Hebrew word. Toitafos is a Hebrew word. And Tat and Pas, the two parts of the Hebrew word, we know the two parts of this Hebrew word are from the other languages, but it's not that we're taking two words from other languages and we have this word in the Torah, which has two parts of another word in this language. Rather, it's our own language. So if it just meant two, it should just say part of the word. Why does it have the whole word? If it only meant to have two parts of the tefillin, it should just say toit. Why does it also say fois? It's to tell you there's four. If the Torah would have said the word toitafos is derived from other languages, and we know that tat means two from Caspian, and we know fois means two from African. So then you might say, okay, so toitafos has the word two in it twice. Doesn't mean that it means four. But now that we're establishing that toitafos is originally a Hebrew word, so now we know that there's actually two parts of this Hebrew word, which both mean two. So now we have a word in Hebrew which has a double expression of two in it. And therefore, Rashi says it must mean four. Okay, if I got everybody lost, I apologize. And I'll hopefully come back to the Tosfos and give you more insight in that Tosfos. Okay, this is all relevant to explain another concept in Gersa Tshuva. The Alter Rebbe says in Gersa Tshuva, if a person makes a mistake and they do Tshuva, it's not sufficient for them to keep the same level of Judaism they had before. The Alter gives the analogy, if you have a knot and the knot tears, you have to make a double knot to replace it. And it brings from the Tanit Vel Yor Rabbah. Tanit Vel Yor Rabbah says a similar thing. He says that if you used to studying one chapter, they study two chapters. You used to studying one page of Talmud, study two pages. That's what it says over there. You're supposed to have double. But when the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, you have to have double as much connection to Hashem as you had before. The Alter Rebbe uses the expression that when you tie a knot that has torn, that place where it's torn has to be kaful mechupel. Now, kaful mechupel means two and two. Kaful means doubled, and mechupel also means doubled. So kaful mechupel doesn't just mean to make a double knot, as it says in the Talmud. Rather, or to two pages of Talmud, like the Tanit Vel Rabbah says, rather it means four. So how come the Alter Rebbe says expression of four if he's talking about two? In the place where the tear was with Hashem, you have to make a kaful mechupel, a doubled knot. So, in a similar way that we explain the word toitafos, we're going to explain this as well. When you learn 2 pages of Talmud every day, it's not that you now know 2 pages only. It says in the Talmud that the words of Torah are poor in one place and rich in others. So if I learn twice as much Talmud every day, I'm not only going to know twice as many pages of Talmud, but each page of Talmud that I study, I'm also going to know that page that much better too, because the each additional study is going to add also not just the quantity, but the quality of learning. In a similar way, in Tshuva, there are 2 components. One element of Tshuva is regretting the past, Another element of tshuva is acceptance for the future. So in order for there to be a permanent resolve to connect myself to Hashem and to stay connected, it has to be in a way of doubled and quadrupled. That's the, in order to make these two elements of tshuva perfect. In other words, each element has to be tied. It's not just two knots or four knots. It's more like each and four separate knots to make this connection. Rather, what we're talking about is that the first knot is considered a permanent knot because it has another knot keeping it in place. And the second knot is considered a permanent knot because it has another knot keeping the second knot in place. So the tshuva service of Hashem is not just double as much as the tzaddik. It's a whole different way of serving Hashem. Just like, for example, it says about it says in the Talmud that if a person's done a sin, there's the Talmud, a person should never say, I don't like eating white meat. But what should you say? You should say, the Talmud says, I love eating white meat. I don't mean chicken, Anyways, I love eating ham. But what can I do? My Father in heaven said to me, I can't eat white meat. I can't eat ham. So the Mizitcha Maggid says, you can only say that. In other words, you should say, I'm doing it because Hashem said so. You shouldn't say because it's bad. Mizitcha Maggid says it depends who you're talking about. If you're talking about somebody who has never tasted ham, so then fine. But somebody who has already made many mistakes in their life, they shouldn't play tricks like that. They shouldn't try to engage in a subject where they're seeing something that they failed in before in a positive light, because that can trigger things and that could lead in the wrong direction. So only a tzaddik was never made any mistakes in his life. Only he could say, I would rather have this, but I can't have it because Hashem said so. But someone who has made this mistake before, he needs to be more distant from this. And he has a different way of serving Hashem. So when we say that the Baal Tshuva has to study twice as much Torah as he studied before, it's a whole different level of Torah study. And it's similar to when in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe uses expression doubled and quadrupled in other places. The Alter Rebbe uses expression when he talks about the exertion you need to have to meditate in the greatness of Hashem. He says you need to have a great exertion, doubled and quadrupled. That's Alter Rebbe uses. And Alter Rebbe uses expression also about joy. He says, when you think about how Hashem is happy to have a home in your heart and mind, that should bring you to have a doubled and quadrupled joy, because you think about how Hashem is happy with you. Hashem is happy to be with you. So the meaning of a double joy is not just a joy times two, but each joy adds in the other. When God sees that a Jew is happy, that adds joy to Hashem. And when a Jew knows that he causes joy to Hashem, that adds to a Jew's happiness. So it's not just there's a double joy because God's happy and the Jew is happy, but there's a symbiotic. It's like we learned yesterday in the laws of Shabbas. The Rambam says if you carry a weight that's too hard for you, Rambam says you're not liable to death penalty on Shabbos. If you carry something outside that's too heavy for you to carry, you're not liable to death penalty because you did something which is unusual. So let's say you can carry 50 pounds and I can carry 50 pounds. And we carry outside on Shabbos something which is 150 pounds. The Rambam says we're liable. Why? Because two people, because the sum is greater than the total of its parts, and two people carrying something together are able to do more than each one by themselves. There is something added by the symbiotic energy of us both together. So in a similar way, when we talk about God's joy and our joy, though, the Alter Rebbe says we should be happy in thinking how happy Hashem is in having a home here. That happiness is symbiotic. It's something more than just two. So in a similar way, when the Alter Rebbe says about when we're talking about tshuva, that you have to have a doubled devotion to Hashem to only study more Torah, not just an additional amount of Torah. It's a deeper approach to the study of Torah. It's similar to in Tefillin Shal Yad and Tefillin Shal Rosh, that the halacha is that you can wear each tefillin by itself and it's still a mitzvah. If you only have one, Tefillin Shal Yad, Tefillin Shal Rosh, you can wear only one. It's happened to me many times. I asked someone they want to put on tefillin, like, I put on the head one. I don't want to do the whole thing. But this, in addition to the fact that you put on both tefillin, you have two pairs of tefillin. Each pair contributes to the other. That's why we wear them together. Okay, so that's the basic idea of tshuva. That's not just similar to tefillin. It's not just you have two pairs of tefillin, but each one adds to the other in a similar way. When a person does tshuva and they, as it says in the Torah, they're supposed to add in the Torah study. It's not just additional Torah study. There's a whole different level of bond with Hashem, so that the regret for the past, the acceptance for the future, is a doubled and quadrupled knot in the sense that it's a resolve that will not be broken by this additional learning and adding to the Torah study that you're doing. It causes there to be a different kind of connection, not just quantity. All right. Any questions? All right.